evacuation of Indian citizens out of the civil war hit Sudan is on in full swing. The first batch of the stranded Indians have left Sudan under Operation Kaveri and INS Sumedha, with 278 people on board it, has departed from Port Sudan for Jeddah. These are the visuals that we are putting out for our viewers of Operation Kaveri. First batch of Indians who were stranded in the civil war hit Sudan have now left Sudan and they are on their way to Jeddah. Right now, the first batch consists of 278 people. They are on board INS Sumedha. This is the Operation Kaveri, the nomenclature that has been given by the central government for this evacuation process that's been started. Remember, there were so many voices, grief-torn voices, who were appealing to the government back home for their safe evacuation because they were stuck there. Even the Indian embassy in Khartoum wasn't really able to do much, but the communication lines never really stopped. And right now we see an outcome of that very communication. The first batch of the stranded Indians in Sudan have been taken out of the country, and they are right now on board INS Sumedha. My colleague Abhishek Jha now joins us on the broadcast. Abhishek, Operation Kaveri on in full swing.
Of course, and we have seen how instrumental External Affairs Minister has been on overall this project, where he has been in regular touch with the various counterparts and foreign ministers of US, UK, Saudis, Egyptian foreign minister. He's been traveling to in Latin American countries, so he has been meeting with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres as well in New York. So clearly, Indian government has been doing everything possibly it can to ensure that all the Indians who are stuck in Sudan are evacuated safely and as quickly as possible. India has already sent INS Sumedha, which is anchored at Port Sudan, and two Air Force aircraft are stationed in Jeddah, and so most likely now these Indians who are being on board on INS Sumedha, they'll be taken to Jeddah, which is across the sea, and from there onwards they will be coming back to home. MOS Minister of External Affairs Muralidharan, he is in Jeddah and he is there to monitor all the evacuation process, and so that everything remains smooth, and most likely he'll be also accompanying the first batch of Indians who are being evacuated from Sudan.
Also, Abhishek, there was a tweet that was put out by the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar. He'd spoken about 500 Indians who were stranded in Sudan. They in fact had reached Port Sudan yesterday. Is this 278 part of the same lot that we're talking about?
Exactly. This is the same. This is the first batch of the same group of 500 people that Minister has been talking about. Meanwhile, since there is sort of calmness in Sudan because of the 72 hours of ceasefire that has been announced between the two warring sides, though there has been small skirmishes in some parts, but still the situation is broadly pacified, and this is the small window where India is also trying everything to ensure that the rest of the Indians who are stranded in various parts of the country, in Khartoum, in Darfur, in other areas also, could be safely brought to the Sudan port, from where they can be evacuated safely to Jeddah or through other mediums. So the road transport in Sudan is currently working. But with a lot of difficulties, Indians are also finding it because the bookings, the number of buses are very limited, and the people who are trying to flee the conflict-ridden state are very large in numbers. People from all the nations, from Britain, from Europe, from Pakistan to other African nations also, everybody is leaving that conflict-ridden area right now. So it is really difficult for Indians also to arrange for their own transportation. Yes. So whoever is reaching to the Port Sudan will be evacuated safely by the Indian government in the next couple of days.
Absolutely. And Abhishek, also it's important to tell our viewers that the Navy ship option has been exercised because Sudan's airspace remains closed. We had seen earlier when we were getting all of those voices of the stranded Indians. In fact, we were one of the first channels to speak to people who are stranded in Khartoum. They also had, in fact, mentioned that they are in touch with the Indian embassy there in Khartoum. And we'd also heard that there are various other international airspaces and also countries who are trying to offer help in case of the airspace closure in Sudan. Is there any option of airlifting the Indians out of Sudan?
See, there have been some airlifting by some of the countries, by USA or by French government also, who have their military bases in that region, like French military who had base in Djibouti. They had done a couple of sorties from there to Sudan, from where they evacuated their senior people, their diplomats, their staff, embassy staff working in Sudan, and 5 Indians were also part of that group, which were actually evacuated by the French militaries. In fact, by the US government also there has been some evacuation of Indians. Saudi Arabian flights have also taken out a couple of Indians. But then the airspace is very limited, and the options to operate a normal civilian aircraft in Sudan is very minimal right now. So the most feasible way has been to bring all the stranded people by road to the Sudan port, from where they can be brought to Jeddah, which is across the sea. That is the part that INS Sumedha is going to do, and from Jeddah they will be there are 2 Indian Air Force aircraft which are stationed there, and they'll be taking these stranded India back to home safely in a couple of hours.
Abhishek, we also heard that there are other countries like France. In fact, Abhishek, stay on with us. We're getting Sushant Sareen on the broadcast now. Sushant, the first batch of Indians who are stranded in Sudan have been brought to Port Sudan. Now they are all set to come to Jeddah via the sea route. This is an important operation. I was going to ask my colleague also this. I'd like your views. Considering there is no bar on nationality that's been done by many countries, and I believe India is also following the same route, where France has ended up evacuating a lot of Indians as part of their own evacuation process. Would we see something similar as part of Operation Kaveri as well?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar. We've seen Indians pulling, the Indian armed forces or the Indian diplomats pulling out other country nationals in the past as well. When the last time there was an evacuation from Yemen, there were people from other nationalities, mostly South Asian, who were pulled out. We've seen that in Ukraine as well, that when the evacuations were taking place, we pulled out some Pakistanis as well, but also Nepalese and a couple of other nationality students out of there. So if some other nationalities are going to be pulled out of Sudan by the Indian naval ship, then that's pretty much par for the course. Just like the French and some of the other countries are also helping in the evacuation of other countries' citizens. So I don't think there's anything extraordinary in that.
Okay. We're talking about a Navy ship that's being used, INS Sumedha in this case, for the evacuation, just because the airspace in Sudan remains closed. Do you think in the times to come, in the days to come, there is going to be any possibility that the airspace does open up so that all the stranded Indians can be airlifted as well?
Well, that's the hope, and I'm sure that is what most of the other countries would be trying for. That at least if there's some kind of a ceasefire, some kind of a pause, the air links can be used to effect an evacuation out of a place which is not close to the sea, then that will be ideal. But if you look at in terms of the numbers of people who can be pulled out by a ship is obviously much bigger.
Yes.
The only problem is access to a seaport. If you are in Khartoum, then it will be very difficult for people to get access to the seaport because of the disturbed conditions. So ideally, the air route is the only way out. But that will depend on the availability of the airspace, the safety of flying in and flying out of that place. And that cannot be done if there is a shooting match going on between two of these factions in the capital city or in rest of Sudan for that matter. So yeah, it's going to be a tricky thing, but I think India is not alone in this. There'll be other countries also which will be trying to get some.
Sushant, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. And with that, we are going back to our story that is a top focus, where the Bihar politician who was actually accused of a crime, that is the murder and lynching of an IS officer, his